The morning sun beat down mercilessly on Camp Pendleton as recruit Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus with 43 other fresh faces. Her hands instinctively moved to adjust her sleeves, making sure they covered the twisted scars that ran from her wrists to her elbows. The marks told a story she wasn't ready to share with anyone, especially not here. Staff Sergeant Williams barked orders that echoed across the concrete, his voice cutting through the nervous chatter of new recruits. Sarah shouldered her duffel bag and followed the group toward the barracks, keeping her head down and her arms covered. She had worked too hard to get here, to let anything derail her dreams now. The other recruits were a mix of eager teenagers fresh out of high school and older men and women seeking a fresh start. Sarah fell somewhere in between at 22. But her experiences had aged her beyond her years. She had survived things that would break most people, and those survival instincts kicked in as she assessed her new environment. "Listen up, maggots." Staff Sergeant Williams stood before them like a mountain of muscle and authority. "You think you're tough? You think you've got what it takes to earn the title Marine? We'll see about that. For the next 13 weeks, your sorry lives belong to me and the other drill instructors. You'll eat when we say eat, sleep when we say sleep, and breathe when we say breathe." Sarah stood at attention with the others, her spine straight and eyes forward. She had prepared for this moment for years, working multiple jobs to save money and get in shape. The physical training would be brutal, but she knew she could handle it. What worried her more were the people around her. During the initial paperwork processing, recruits were assigned to squads and bunks. Sarah found herself in 3rd Squad, with 11 other women from various backgrounds. There was Jessica, a cheerleader from Texas who talked constantly about her boyfriend back home. Maria, a quiet girl from California whose family had immigrated from Mexico. And then there was Ashley Thompson. Ashley came from money. That much was obvious from her perfectly manicured nails and the way she spoke about her father's connections in the military. She had blonde hair pulled back in a regulation ponytail and blue eyes that seemed to take in everything with calculating precision. From the moment Ashley saw Sarah, something clicked in her expression. "So what's with the long sleeves?" Ashley asked during their first evening in the barracks. "It's like 90 degrees outside, and you're dressed for winter." Sarah continued folding her uniforms, not looking up. "Just prefer them. Come on, we're all going to be living together for months. No secrets here." Ashley's tone was friendly enough, but there was an edge to it that made Sarah's stomach clench. Jessica bounced over from her bunk, always eager to be part of any conversation. "Yeah, Sarah, we should all get to know each other. I heard some girls talking about going swimming in the lake this weekend if we get liberty." "I don't swim," Sarah said quietly, still focused on her folding. Ashley's eyes narrowed with interest. "Doesn't swim? Won't take off the long sleeves? What are you hiding under there? Track marks? Gang tattoos?" She laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. The comment hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had heard variations of it before, always from people who thought they were clever. Her hands stopped moving, and for a moment the barracks went quiet except for the distant sound of other squads running drill commands outside. Maria, who had been reading a letter from home, looked up with concern. "Leave her alone, Ashley. Everyone's got their reasons for being here." "I'm just curious," Ashley said with exaggerated innocence. "I mean, we're all going to be depending on each other out there. Don't we have a right to know if someone's got issues that could affect the team?" Sarah finally looked up, her dark eyes meeting Ashley's blue ones directly. "I don't have issues that will affect anyone's performance, including yours." Something in Sarah's tone made Ashley's smirk falter for just a moment. There was steel in those words, forged by experiences Ashley couldn't begin to imagine. But Ashley recovered quickly, her entitled confidence reasserting itself. "We'll see about that," Ashley said, turning back to her own bunk. "Basic training has a way of revealing everyone's weaknesses." That night, as the barracks settled into quiet exhaustion after their first full day of processing and initial training, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. She could hear Jessica's soft snoring and Maria whispering prayers in Spanish. Somewhere across the room, Ashley was probably planning her next attack. Sarah had survived worse than entitled rich girls with too much time and too little empathy. She had survived the accident that left her scarred and broken at 17. She had survived the months of painful surgeries and physical therapy. She had survived the stares and whispers and cruel comments from people who saw her scars as entertainment or weakness. What they didn't know was that every scar represented a moment she chose to fight instead of giving up. Every mark on her skin was proof that she was stronger than whatever tried to break her. The Marines would test that strength in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But she was ready. Outside, she could hear the distant sound of the ocean against the cliffs. Tomorrow would bring their first real day of training, with drill instructors who would push them harder than they had ever been pushed before. There would be physical challenges, mental tests, and endless opportunities for her squadmates to discover what she was hiding. Sarah touched the scars on her left arm through the fabric of her shirt, feeling the familiar texture of healed tissue. Soon enough, Ashley and the others would see them. But Sarah had learned long ago that the only opinion that mattered was her own. She had come here to become a Marine, and no amount of ridicule or curiosity would stop her from achieving that goal. The clock on the wall showed 0200 hours. In 4 hours, their real test would begin. Sarah closed her eyes and let her breathing slow, drawing on the meditation techniques she had learned during her recovery. She would need all her strength for what lay ahead, but she had never been afraid of hard work or pain. What she didn't know was that General Patricia Reynolds, the base commander and a living legend in the Marine Corps, had already taken notice of her file. The general had a habit of reviewing the backgrounds of recruits who showed unusual determination or overcame significant obstacles to enlist. Sarah's story had caught her attention weeks ago, but that revelation would come later. For now, Sarah slept the sleep of someone who had survived the worst life could throw at her and was ready for whatever came next. The alarm shattered the pre-dawn quiet at exactly 0500 hours. Drill instructor Staff Sergeant Williams exploded through the barracks doors like a force of nature, his voice booming commands that sent recruits scrambling from their bunks in various states of confusion and panic. Move, move, move. You have exactly 4 minutes to be dressed, bunks made, and standing at attention. Anyone not ready gets the entire platoon extra PT. Sarah was already moving, her military-issued clothing laid out the night before in perfect order. Years of rigid routine had taught her the value of preparation. Around her, other recruits stumbled through their morning routine with varying degrees of success. Jessica struggled with her hair, trying to get it into regulation standards while hopping on one foot to pull on her boot. Maria moved with quiet efficiency. But Ashley seemed to think this was all some kind of game, taking her time with deliberate slowness. Thompson. Staff Sergeant Williams appeared behind Ashley like a thunderstorm. You think this is summer camp? You think we're here for your entertainment? Ashley turned with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. No, Staff Sergeant. Just making sure everything is perfect. Perfect? Williams' voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Let me tell you what perfect looks like, recruit. Perfect is being ready when I say be ready. Perfect is not making your fellow Marines wait while you play princess. Drop and give me 20. As Ashley hit the floor for push-ups, Williams' gaze swept the rest of the squad. His eyes lingered on Sarah for a moment, noting her crisp uniform and properly made bunk, then moved on without comment. The next 6 hours were a blur of physical training, weapons familiarization, and classroom instruction. During the afternoon combat training session, the temperature climbed past 90 degrees. Other recruits began rolling up their sleeves and loosening their uniforms within regulation limits to deal with the heat. Sarah kept her sleeves down and buttoned at the wrists, even as sweat beaded on her forehead and her breathing grew labored. She completed every exercise without complaint, matching the pace of recruits who were dressed more appropriately for the weather. Martinez. Drill instructor Gunnery Sergeant Lopez called out during a water break. You feeling all right? You look like you're about to pass out. I'm fine, Gunny, Sarah replied, accepting a canteen and drinking deeply. Then why are you dressed for winter when it's hotter than the devil's armpit out here? Before Sarah could answer, Ashley's voice cut across the group. She's got something to hide under there, Gunny. Won't tell us what it is. Tried. 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 Several recruits turned to look, including some from other squads who had overheard. Sarah felt heat that had nothing to do with the California sun creep up her neck. Gunnery Sergeant Lopez studied Sarah with the practiced eye of someone who had seen every kind of recruit in his 15-year career. That true, Martinez? You hiding something under those sleeves? Sarah's jaw tightened. Permission to speak freely, Gunnery Sergeant? Granted. What's under my sleeves doesn't affect my ability to complete training or serve as a Marine. I meet all physical and mental requirements for service. Lopez nodded slowly. Fair enough. But if you pass out from heat exhaustion because you're too proud or too stubborn to dress appropriately for conditions, that does affect your ability to serve, and it affects your team's ability to complete the mission. You understand that, recruit? Yes. Gunnery Sergeant. Good. Now drop and give me 30, for making me worry about your welfare. Sarah hit the ground immediately, pumping out push-ups while the rest of the squad watched. She could feel Ashley's satisfied smirk without looking up, but she could also feel something else. The respect of several recruits who had watched her keep up with everyone, despite obviously struggling with the heat. That evening, during personal time, Ashley made her move. She had spent the day observing and calculating, and now she had an audience of curious recruits gathered in the common area. So, Martinez, Ashley said loudly enough for everyone to hear, how long are you going to keep us all in suspense? What's the big secret? Sarah was writing a letter to her younger brother back home, trying to focus on the words instead of the attention she could feel focusing on her. Maybe she's got prison tattoos, suggested Kevin, a recruit from Chicago who seemed eager to join Ashley's game. Gang symbols or something, or maybe self-harm scars, Ashley said with false concern. That would explain why she's so secretive about it. Wouldn't want the Corps to know she's mentally unstable. The comment hit its target perfectly. Sarah's pen stopped moving, her grip tightening until her knuckles went white. Around the room, conversations quieted as other recruits sensed drama brewing. Maria stood up from where she had been reading. That's enough, Ashley. You don't know anything about her. I know she's keeping secrets from her fellow Marines, Ashley shot back. And I know that in combat, secrets get people killed. Sarah set down her pen and turned slowly to face Ashley. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried an edge that made several recruits shift uncomfortably. You want to know about my scars? Sarah stood up, her eyes never leaving Ashley's face. You think they make me weak? You think they disqualify me from serving? The room went completely silent. Even recruits from other squads had stopped what they were doing to listen. Sarah began rolling up her left sleeve slowly, deliberately. The scars were revealed inch by inch. Twisted, angry-looking tissue that covered her forearm from wrist to elbow. They were clearly from severe burns, with the characteristic texture of skin grafts and surgical reconstruction. House fire when I was 17, Sarah said matter-of-factly. I went back in 3 times to get my little brother and sister out. 3rd time, the ceiling came down on me. Ashley's smirk had completely disappeared. Several recruits stared in shock at the extent of the scarring, but there was no disgust in their expressions. Only recognition of what those scars represented. Sarah rolled up her right sleeve, revealing similar damage. Spent 4 months in the hospital. 8 surgeries. 2 years of physical therapy to regain full use of my hands. The doctors said I'd never have normal strength or flexibility again. She flexed her fingers, then made a fist, the movement smooth and controlled despite the scar tissue. But I'm here. I completed every physical requirement to enlist. I can outshoot most of you, outrun half of you, and I guarantee I can outwork all of you. Her gaze swept the room before settling back on Ashley. These scars don't make me weak. They make me someone who runs toward the fire when everyone else runs away. The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then, Kevin, the recruit from Chicago who had made the prison tattoo comment, stood up and extended his hand to Sarah. I owe you an apology, he said simply. And I'd be honored to serve alongside you. One by one, other recruits approached Sarah, some offering apologies, others simply showing respect through nods or handshakes. The dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Ashley remained seated, her face flushed with embarrassment and something that might have been shame. For the first time since arriving at boot camp, she had nothing to say. As the group dispersed for evening hygiene and preparation for lights out, Sarah found herself surrounded by squad mates, who now looked at her with new respect. The secret she had tried so hard to hide had become the foundation for something stronger than concealment. But neither Sarah nor any of the other recruits knew that their conversation had been overheard by someone making evening rounds. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had paused outside the common area when he heard the tension in the voices, ready to intervene if necessary. Instead, he had witnessed something that would find its way into a report that would cross General Reynolds' desk within hours. The general had been following Sarah's progress with quiet interest, and this incident would add another layer to her growing understanding of the young recruit's character. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and Ashley's public humiliation would likely drive her to find new ways to assert her dominance. But tonight, Sarah slept with her sleeves rolled up for the first time since arriving at boot camp, finally free from the weight of hiding who she really was. Week 4 of boot camp brought the dreaded crucible preparation, intense combat scenarios designed to test every skill the recruits had learned. The California heat had settled into a relentless pattern that turned the training grounds into an oven by midday. Sarah had found her rhythm within the platoon structure. Her revelation about her scars had shifted the social dynamics completely. Where once she had been an outsider keeping secrets, she was now quietly regarded as one of the strongest members of their group. Her work ethic was legendary, and her willingness to help struggling recruits had earned her genuine respect. Ashley, however, had not recovered from her public embarrassment. If anything, her behavior had become more calculated and vindictive. She had learned to be more subtle in her attacks, finding ways to undermine Sarah without exposing herself to the kind of humiliation she had experienced that night in the common area. The morning started with a 5-mile run in full gear. Sarah maintained her position near the front of the formation, her breathing steady despite the weight of her pack and weapon. Behind her, she could hear Ashley's labored breathing and occasional complaints about the pace. "Martinez is showing off again," Ashley muttered to Jessica, loud enough for others to hear. "Probably trying to prove something to make up for her issues." Jessica had grown distant from Ashley over the past weeks, having witnessed how cruel her comments could be. "Maybe she's just in good shape," Jessica replied diplomatically. "Or maybe she's overcompensating because she knows she doesn't really belong here," Ashley pressed. "I mean, someone with that kind of psychological trauma, who knows when she might snap?" The comment reached Sarah's ears, but she maintained her pace without responding. She had learned long ago that the best response to Ashley's provocations was success. Let her actions speak louder than any words could. During weapons training that afternoon, the drill instructors announced a new exercise. Each recruit would be evaluated on their ability to field strip and reassemble their rifle while blindfolded, under stress conditions that included shouted commands and time pressure. "This is about muscle memory and staying calm under pressure," Staff Sergeant Williams explained. "In combat, you might need to clear a jam or perform maintenance in complete darkness while taking enemy fire. Your weapon is your lifeline, and you need to know it better than your own heartbeat." The recruits were called up one by one. Some performed well, others struggled with the pressure and made mistakes. When Ashley's turn came, she completed the task adequately, but not impressively, earning a grudging nod from the evaluating sergeant. "Martinez, you're up." Sarah stepped forward and accepted the blindfold, then knelt beside the disassembled rifle laid out on the table. The drill instructors immediately began shouting conflicting commands, creating a wall of noise designed to break concentration. "Enemy contact left. Take cover. Incoming mortar. Move, move, move." Sarah's hands moved with practiced precision. Despite never having performed this exact drill before, her fingers found each component by feel, her muscle memory guiding her through the disassembly and reassembly with fluid efficiency. The months of physical therapy had given her an intimate understanding of how her hands worked, and she had developed a tactile awareness that served her well now. When she finished and removed the blindfold, the rifle was perfectly assembled and ready for action. The timer showed she had completed the task in record time for their group. "Outstanding, Martinez," Staff Sergeant Williams said, genuine approval in his voice. "That's how it's done, people." As Sarah returned to formation, she caught Ashley's expression, a mixture of frustration and something darker. It was becoming clear that no amount of success would satisfy Ashley's need to see Sarah fail. That evening brought an unexpected announcement. General Patricia Reynolds would be conducting a surprise inspection and evaluation the following day. The entire base buzzed with nervous energy as word spread through the barracks. "Who is General Reynolds?" Jessica asked during evening cleanup. Maria looked up from polishing her boots. "My cousin served under her in Afghanistan. Says she's a legend. First woman to command a Marine combat unit in active combat. Has more medals than some entire battalions. She's also known for personally evaluating recruits who show exceptional promise or face unusual challenges," added Kevin, who had become one of Sarah's closest allies in the platoon. "My recruiter told me she sometimes pulls people aside for special assignments." 1. Ashley perked up at this information. Her father had mentioned General Reynolds before. A rising star in the Corps, who had the kind of influence that could make or break careers. What kind of special assignments? End quote. Elite training programs. Early promotion tracks. Special operations consideration, Kevin explained. But she's also known for washing out people who don't meet her standards, regardless of their background or connections. That night, Ashley lay awake forming a plan. If General Reynolds was looking for exceptional recruits, she needed to find a way to distinguish herself, while simultaneously undermining Sarah's growing reputation. The fire story had made Sarah sympathetic, but Ashley was convinced she could twist it into evidence of psychological instability if given the right opportunity. The next morning brought chaos as the entire base prepared for the general's arrival. Uniforms were inspected to perfection, equipment was cleaned until it gleamed, and every recruit mentally rehearsed their knowledge and skills. General Reynolds arrived exactly on schedule, her presence commanding immediate attention despite her relatively small stature. She was in her early 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She moved through the base with purpose, observing training exercises and occasionally stopping to speak with individual recruits. During the afternoon combat scenario, the general positioned herself where she could observe the recruits working through a complex urban warfare simulation. The exercise required teams to clear a mock building while under simulated fire, rescuing hostages and neutralizing targets. Sarah's team was the third to attempt the scenario. As team leader for this exercise, she had studied the layout and developed a strategy that emphasized coordination and communication over speed. She positioned her team members according to their strengths, giving Ashley responsibility for covering their withdrawal route. The simulation began with explosive sound effects and smoke grenades that created chaos and confusion. Sarah moved her team through the building methodically, using hand signals to maintain communication when verbal orders became impossible. Halfway through the exercise, Ashley made her move. Instead of maintaining her assigned position, she advanced into the building, ostensibly to provide additional support, but actually disrupting the carefully planned formation. "What are you doing?" Sarah hissed through the simulated gunfire. "Get back to your position." 1. "I saw an opportunity for a better angle," Ashley replied, her voice carrying farther than necessary. "You're being too cautious. We need to move faster." The disruption caused confusion among the other team members. 2 recruits collided in the hallway when they moved to fill Ashley's abandoned position, and the exercise began to unravel. But Sarah adapted. Instead of trying to force Ashley back into position, she rapidly reorganized the team around the new reality, assigning roles on the fly and maintaining forward momentum despite the chaos. General Reynolds watched intently as Sarah demonstrated leadership under pressure, turning a potentially disastrous situation into a successful mission completion. The general also noticed Ashley's deliberate insubordination and the way it had been handled. After the exercise, General Reynolds requested private debriefings with several recruits, including both Sarah and Ashley. These sessions were conducted in a small office away from the other recruits, with only the general and the individual recruit present. Ashley went first, confident that this was her opportunity to showcase her initiative and leadership potential while subtly undermining Sarah's performance. "General Reynolds, it's an honor to meet you," Ashley began, her voice carrying the practiced charm she had perfected over years of social maneuvering. "I've heard so much about your distinguished career." "Recruit Thompson," the general replied neutrally, consulting a file on her desk. "Tell me about your decision to abandon your assigned position during the exercise." Ashley had prepared for this question. I saw an opportunity to better support the team objective, ma'am. Sometimes leadership requires making difficult decisions that might not follow the original plan. And did you communicate this decision to your team leader? I attempted to, ma'am, but the situation was developing rapidly. Sometimes you have to act on initiative rather than wait for permission. 1. General Reynolds made a note in her file. I see. And what's your assessment of Recruit Martinez's leadership during the exercise? This was the opening Ashley had been waiting for. Recruit Martinez is dedicated, ma'am. But I have concerns about her stability under pressure. She has a history of trauma that might affect her decision-making in high-stress situations. The general's expression didn't change, but something cold entered her eyes. Explain. She was involved in a house fire, ma'am. Severely injured. The psychological impact of that kind of trauma? Well, it sometimes manifests in unpredictable ways. I've observed her having difficulty with situations involving fire or loud noises. During today's exercise with the explosions and smoke, she seemed to hesitate at critical moments. Ashley delivered the lies smoothly, mixing enough truth to make them credible, while painting Sarah as psychologically damaged and unreliable. She was confident that her concerns would be taken seriously, especially coming from someone with her family's military connections. General Reynolds listened without interruption, her face revealing nothing. When Ashley finished, the general made another note and dismissed her with a simple, "Thank you, recruit." That will be all. Ashley left the meeting convinced she had successfully undermined Sarah while positioning herself as a concerned and observant potential leader. She had no idea that General Reynolds had already read Sarah's complete military file, including the detailed psychological evaluations that had cleared her for service. More importantly, Ashley didn't know that General Reynolds had witnessed the house fire incident herself, 5 years earlier, when she was still a colonel, stationed near Sarah's hometown. She had been the investigating officer who recommended Sarah for a civilian heroism commendation that never made it into her military records due to administrative oversight. The general remembered 17-year-old Sarah Martinez very clearly, and she was eager to finally meet the young woman who had grown from that brave teenager into the exceptional recruit she had been quietly following through boot camp. 20 minutes after Ashley left the debriefing room, Sarah knocked on the door and was invited to enter. She marched in with precise military bearing, stopped at the appropriate distance from the general's desk, and rendered a perfect salute. "Recruit Martinez reporting as ordered, ma'am." General Reynolds returned the salute and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "At ease. Recruit. Please, sit." As Sarah took her seat, the general studied her with the intensity of someone who had spent decades evaluating Marines under the most challenging conditions. What she saw was a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence despite the visible scars that marked her forearms. "Tell me about your decision-making process during today's exercise," the general began, her tone neutral, but not unfriendly. Sarah had expected this question and answered honestly. "Ma'am, when Recruit Thompson left her assigned position, it created a gap in our defensive coverage. I had two choices. Order her back to position, which would have caused delays and potentially escalated into a discipline issue during the mission, or adapt the plan to work around the new reality. I chose adaptation because mission completion was the priority." "And how did you feel about a subordinate disregarding your orders?" "Frustrated, ma'am, but not surprised. Recruit Thompson has shown a pattern of prioritizing individual recognition over team objectives. However, my personal feelings about her behavior couldn't be allowed to compromise the mission." General Reynolds made a note. Impressed by the mature response, most recruits would have either defended their teammate or thrown them under the bus. Sarah had done neither, simply stating facts without emotion. "Recruit Thompson expressed concerns about your psychological fitness for service," the general said, watching Sarah's reaction carefully. "She suggested that your trauma history might affect your performance under stress." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained steady. "Ma'am, I underwent comprehensive psychological evaluation as part of my enlistment process. I was cleared for service without restrictions. My performance in training has consistently met or exceeded standards." She specifically mentioned difficulties with fire and explosive sounds. This time, Sarah's reaction was more visible. Not fear or defensiveness, but something that looked like disappointment mixed with anger. "Ma'am? Permission to speak freely? Granted. Recruit Thompson is lying." The words were delivered with absolute certainty. "She has been attempting to undermine my standing in the platoon since our first day. Today's incident during the exercise was deliberate insubordination designed to make me look incompetent as a leader. When that failed, she apparently decided to attack my character directly." General Reynolds leaned back in her chair. "Those are serious accusations, Recruit." "Yes, ma'am, they are. And I can provide witnesses to verify every claim I've made. Recruit Thompson has made multiple comments about my scars, my mental state, and my fitness for service. Other members of our squad have heard these comments and can attest to their frequency and nature." The general consulted her file again, though Sarah couldn't see what was written there. "What would you say if I told you that I have first-hand knowledge of the incident that caused your injuries?" Sarah's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you mean." General Reynolds closed the file and looked directly at Sarah. "5 years ago, I was Colonel Reynolds, stationed at Camp Wilson. I was the investigating officer who reviewed the civilian fire department's report on a house fire that occurred in your neighborhood. A house fire where a 17-year-old girl made 3 separate entries into a burning building to rescue her siblings." The color drained from Sarah's face as the implication sank in. "You know about. I know that you suffered severe burns over 40% of your body. I know that you refused evacuation until you were certain your brother and sister were safe. I know that the fire chief recommended you for a civilian heroism award, and I know that I personally endorsed that recommendation." Sarah sat in stunned silence as memories of that night flooded back. She remembered the heat, the smoke, the way the ceiling felt ready to collapse on the third trip back into the house. She remembered waking up in the hospital weeks later to learn that her siblings had survived without serious injury. "I also know," the general continued, "that you spent 2 years in physical therapy, rebuilding the strength and flexibility in your arms and hands. That you worked 3 jobs to save money for college and military preparation. That you scored in the top 5% on every military aptitude test. And that your psychological evaluation described you as one of the most resilient and mentally stable candidates they had ever assessed." General Reynolds stood and walked around her desk, stopping directly in front of Sarah. "Recruit Thompson doesn't know any of this, of course. She sees scars and assumes weakness. She sees someone who doesn't fit her narrow definition of what a Marine should look like, and she feels threatened." Sarah found her voice again. "Ma'am, why are you telling me this?" "Because in about 10 minutes, I'm going to address your entire platoon. And I'm going to use a very specific call sign when I refer to you. A call sign that was assigned to you 5 years ago by the fire department that night, but never made it into your civilian records due to administrative oversight." The general returned to her seat and opened a different file. "You see, Sarah, the Marine Corps has been tracking you since you were 17 years old. Not officially, of course. But certain officers in the recruitment chain have a habit of keeping an eye on individuals who display the kind of courage and character we value." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. The idea that her path to the Marines had been influenced by events from her teenage years seemed impossible, but the general's detailed knowledge made it undeniable. "Your call sign that night was Phoenix," General Reynolds said quietly. "Because like the mythical bird, you rose from the ashes stronger than before. The scars that Recruit Thompson sees as weakness are actually proof of your strength. They're your qualification credentials, not your disqualifying factors." The general stood again, signaling that the interview was ending. "In a few minutes, I'm going to call your platoon to attention and address some concerns that have been brought to my attention about unit cohesion and leadership. When I refer to you by your call sign, I want you to remember that you earned it long before you ever set foot in boot camp." Sarah stood and came to attention, her mind still spinning from the revelations. "Ma'am, what about Recruit Thompson?" "Recruit Thompson will learn a valuable lesson about the difference between leadership and manipulation. She'll also learn that attempting to undermine a fellow Marine based on assumptions and lies is conduct unbecoming of a Marine. Whether she learns from that lesson or washes out of the program will be up to her. General Reynolds moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Recruit, after graduation, assuming you continue to perform at your current level, there will be opportunities for advanced training and leadership development. The Corps invests heavily in Marines who demonstrate the kind of character you've shown, both before and during your time here. Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Phoenix. Now, let's go address your platoon. As they walked toward the assembly area where the platoon was already gathering, Sarah felt a strange mixture of nervousness and anticipation. The secret shame she had carried about her scars was transforming into something entirely different. For the first time, she was beginning to see them the way General Reynolds did. Not as marks of damage, but as evidence of her strength. Behind them, Ashley waited with the rest of the platoon, confident that her meeting with the general had achieved its purpose. She expected to see Sarah removed from leadership positions, perhaps even recommended for psychological evaluation. She had no idea that in the next few minutes, her carefully constructed attack would backfire in ways she couldn't have imagined. The platoon stood at rigid attention as General Reynolds approached, Sarah walking slightly behind and to the right as protocol dictated. Staff Sergeant Williams called the formation to even stricter attention, if such a thing was possible. General Reynolds took her position at the front of the formation, her presence commanding absolute silence from the assembled recruits. The California sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the training ground. Recruits, the general began, her voice carrying clearly across the formation. I've spent the day observing your training and conducting evaluations of your leadership potential and character. I've been impressed by many of you, and disappointed by others. Ashley felt a surge of confidence. This was exactly what she had hoped for. A public recognition of the concerns she had raised about Sarah's fitness for service. Leadership in the Marine Corps isn't about personal ambition or political maneuvering, the general continued. It's about putting the mission and your fellow Marines before your own interests. It's about making decisions based on facts, rather than assumptions. And it's about recognizing strength in all its forms. The general's gaze swept across the formation, pausing momentarily on Ashley before moving on. Some of you have demonstrated these qualities consistently. Others have demonstrated that they still have much to learn about what it means to be a Marine. General Reynolds turned slightly, her eyes finding Sarah in the formation. Today, I want to tell you about a Marine whose call sign is Phoenix. The moment General Reynolds spoke the call sign, Phoenix, the entire dynamic of the formation shifted. Sarah's spine straightened with surprise and recognition, while Ashley's confident expression began to crumble as she realized something was going very wrong with her plan. Phoenix earned her call sign 5 years ago, General Reynolds continued, her voice carrying across the silent training ground. When she was 17 years old, on a Tuesday night in March, she made 3 separate entries into a burning house to rescue her 8-year-old brother and 6-year-old sister. Several recruits risked glances toward Sarah, understanding beginning to dawn on their faces. Ashley stood frozen, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend how her careful manipulation had backfired so completely. The first trip, she got her brother out safely. The second trip, she got her sister. The third trip, she went back for the family cat because her siblings were crying. General Reynolds paused, letting that information sink in. On that third trip, the ceiling collapsed. Phoenix was trapped under burning debris for 6 minutes before firefighters could extract her. The silence was absolute now. Even the drill instructors stood at rigid attention, recognizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. She suffered severe burns over 40% of her body. 4th-degree burns on both arms that required multiple skin grafts and reconstructive surgeries. The doctors said she might never regain full use of her hands. Physical therapists said the scarring would prevent her from ever meeting military fitness standards. General Reynolds turned to face Sarah directly. Phoenix proved them all wrong. She spent 2 years in rehabilitation, worked 3 jobs to pay for her own college education, and scored in the top 5% of every military qualification exam she took. Her psychological evaluation described her as one of the most mentally resilient candidates the examiner had ever assessed. Ashley felt sick as the full scope of her miscalculation became clear. Not only had her attack failed, but she had publicly revealed herself to be someone who would attack a genuine hero based on malicious assumptions. The scars that some of you see as weaknesses, the general continued, are actually proof of the kind of courage and selflessness that the Marine Corps exists to defend. They're evidence of someone who runs toward danger when others run away. They're the physical manifestation of the warrior spirit that we spend 13 weeks trying to develop in all of you. General Reynolds began walking slowly along the formation, her voice rising slightly. But Phoenix's greatest achievement isn't surviving those burns or overcoming the physical challenges of recovery. Her greatest achievement is standing here today, despite having to endure ignorant comments and malicious attacks on her character from people who lack the maturity to recognize genuine strength when they see it. The general stopped directly in front of Ashley, her eyes boring into the recruit with an intensity that made Ashley want to disappear. Some recruits apparently believe that leadership means tearing others down through gossip and manipulation. They believe that undermining a fellow Marine's reputation will somehow elevate their own status. Ashley's face had gone completely white. She could feel the eyes of every recruit in the platoon on her, and she knew that her behavior over the past weeks had been exposed for what it really was. "These recruits are mistaken," General Reynolds said coldly. "Leadership means building others up, not tearing them down. It means making decisions based on facts, not assumptions. It means having the courage to admit when you're wrong and the integrity to make things right." The general stepped back to address the entire formation again. "Phoenix has demonstrated true leadership throughout her time here. She has excelled in every aspect of training while maintaining the kind of character that makes others want to follow her. She has faced adversity with grace and responded to attacks with dignity." General Reynolds returned to the center of the formation. "Effective immediately, Recruit Martinez will be promoted to platoon guide, with responsibility for training coordination and recruit development. She will also be recommended for advanced leadership training upon graduation." Sarah felt a surge of emotion that she struggled to contain. The recognition was beyond anything she had dared to hope for. But more important was the vindication of everything she had endured over the past weeks. "Furthermore," the general continued, "any recruit who wishes to file a formal complaint about leadership decisions or fellow recruit performance may do so through proper channels. Anonymous gossip, character assassination, and attempts to undermine unit cohesion will result in immediate disciplinary action and possible separation from the program." Ashley knew she was finished. The general hadn't mentioned her by name, but everyone in the platoon knew exactly who the comments were directed toward. Her attempt to destroy Sarah had instead revealed her own character flaws to everyone, including the most powerful officer on the base. General Reynolds concluded her remarks with a final observation. "The Marine Corps doesn't create heroes. We simply provide training and opportunities for people who already possess heroic character to develop their skills. Phoenix was a hero long before she arrived here. Our job is to help her become the Marine she's destined to be." As the general dismissed the formation, recruits began to disperse with subdued conversations and meaningful glances. Several approached Sarah immediately, offering congratulations and expressions of respect that had nothing to do with her new rank. Kevin was the first to reach her. "Congratulations, Platoon Guide Martinez. Though I guess we should be calling you Phoenix now." Maria nodded enthusiastically. "I knew there was more to your story than you were telling us. But this is incredible." Even Jessica, who had often been caught between Ashley and Sarah, approached with genuine admiration. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more when Ashley was making those comments. I should have known better." Ashley stood alone near the edge of the group, watching the celebration with growing desperation. She had burned every bridge and destroyed every relationship in pursuit of a goal that had turned into a complete disaster. The other recruits avoided her gaze, and she could see the judgment in their expressions. As the crowd around Sarah began to thin, Ashley made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She walked directly up to Sarah and stood at attention. "Platoon Guide Martinez," she said formally, her voice barely above a whisper. I request permission to speak privately. Sarah studied Ashley's face, seeing genuine distress beneath the formal military bearing. After a moment, she nodded. Granted. Walk with me. They moved away from the other recruits, walking along the edge of the training field as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Ashley broke the silence. I was wrong about everything. Sarah didn't respond immediately, letting Ashley continue. I don't know what I thought. I saw your scars and I assumed they meant you were damaged somehow. I was threatened by how respected you were becoming, and I wanted to tear you down. Ashley's voice was thick with emotion. I never imagined that those scars represented the kind of courage I could never hope to have. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face Ashley directly. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to know that I understand now. And because I want to ask if there's any way I can earn your forgiveness, and maybe learn to be the kind of Marine you already are. Sarah considered the request carefully. Ashley's behavior had been cruel and calculating, driven by jealousy and a sense of entitlement that had made life miserable for everyone around her. But the young woman standing before her now seemed genuinely broken by the realization of what she had done. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, Sarah said finally. It's something you accept when it's offered. I forgive you, Ashley. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You've damaged relationships and hurt people, and rebuilding that trust will take time and consistent action. Ashley nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. I understand. Is there anything I can do to start making things right? Sarah thought for a moment. You can start by being honest with yourself about why you acted the way you did. Then you can start being the person you want to be, instead of the person you've been. The rest will follow. As they walked back toward the barracks, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few hours. The scars she had spent years hiding were now publicly recognized as symbols of honor. The call sign she had never known she possessed connected her to a moment of courage that had shaped her entire life. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that true strength wasn't just about surviving trauma or overcoming physical challenges. It was about maintaining character and integrity when faced with attacks from those who should have been allies. General Reynolds watched from her office window as the two recruits returned to join their platoon. She had seen similar transformations before, moments when young people discovered who they really were beneath the assumptions and expectations of others. Phoenix Martinez would graduate in 6 weeks with honors and immediately enter advanced leadership training. She would go on to serve with distinction in multiple combat deployments and eventually earn her own command. The scars that had once been sources of shame would become symbols of inspiration for countless Marines who served under her leadership. Ashley Thompson would face a choice in the coming days: accept the opportunity for genuine growth and change, or allow her pride to drive her out of the program entirely. General Reynolds hoped she would choose growth, but that decision would be Ashley's to make. As darkness settled over Camp Pendleton, Sarah Martinez stood before her footlocker, carefully folding the uniform she would wear tomorrow as platoon guide. The fabric felt different somehow, weighted with new responsibilities and opportunities she was only beginning to understand. She touched the scars on her left arm, feeling their familiar texture but seeing them with completely new eyes. They were no longer marks of damage to be hidden, but proof of the moment her real journey had begun. From the ashes of that burning house, Phoenix had risen, and now she was ready to soar.